Hey everyone, how's it going? Jordan Arell here, that's me, that's my name, don't wear it out. Making a video about circumcision, probably. We'll see what happens. Yesterday I tried to make a video about circumcision, and I ended up talking very meta about like how I make videos about circumcision and how I need to alter the way I do it, and it ended up being like just a half hour like pep talk to myself. So same thing may happen today, we'll see I guess. Honestly, I think this video is basically uh, me trying to explain my thoughts to myself. I may even do multiple takes of it, so it's possible no one will ever see this. Kind of likely, actually. But I want to explore some ideas I have about what the intactivist movement needs and how we can achieve that and how I hope to contribute to that. So, what I believe the intactivist movement needs most is, well, one thing really, but there's two aspects of it, I think. And it's a culture shift. It's a revolution in culture. It's a way of being, a way of interacting with each other and performing intactivism in which we are more connected to each other and more connected to ourselves. Those are the two aspects, kind of in a vague, cryptic sort of terms. So what I mean by that is, I'll start with connected to ourselves because that one to me is more clear, and it's something I've been working on for a long time. It's something I feel like I have a somewhat unique perspective on, or at least experience with, to share with people, which is this: we need to work with our own experience in a way that makes us more effective. I believe the most difficult thing about working with circumcision and trying to tell other people about this, about, all the things involved in that, it can take a huge toll on people. That's one of the main things I ended up talking about yesterday, was that the reason I had to stop making videos was because I was just pushing myself too hard and getting too sucked into the trauma vortex that circumcision is. And I think this happens to a lot of activists, and I think that the vast majority of intactivists actually burn out after a year or two and leave the movement permanently. I believe it's the exception where people really stick around. I don't think anyone changes their mind. I think they just get overwhelmed with it and leave because they can't. It's just too much. It's just too painful. It's just too awful, and it's just too much to put all of their energy and attention on this horrible thing. And that might seem inherent, but I don't think it's actually has to be that way. I think that in my own experience and in people I've talked with, Brendan Murata, for example, I really think that you can learn to work with your own trauma, your own pain around circumcision with enough. You have to have the skill. You have to have the training. It takes a lot of knowing what to do, and I think one of the main reasons that people don't find healing for their trauma and they're not able to cope with the pain of circumcision, which includes, wanting your foreskin and feeling robbed and feeling just the pain of having such a horrible thing having been done to you by people who are supposed to take care of you, and society essentially turning your back. These are all aspects of trauma. When I say that word trauma, it's very broad and includes all of the pain around circumcision, and all of that different pain can be dealt with in much the same ways. There's a few different fundamental principles and techniques that you can use to work with your trauma. Some of that requires processing and time and effort. So that's another factor. Besides knowing what to do, you have to put in the time and the work to do it. And that's a challenge because people don't have the support, people don't have the knowledge, people aren't encouraged to do it. And that's one of the main things I've tried to do in this movement and will continue to do and hope to actually step up much, much more, is this idea that we have to do our own healing work. We have to be able to work with our own emotions in a way that makes us better activists. Because if we... the thing with trauma is what happens when you're traumatized is you tend to be sucked into this trauma vortex. You tend to feel angry, you feel depressed, enraged, hateful, and you have a very... This is just trauma generally now. I'm not even talking about circumcision trauma, but this is what happens with any trauma. You form a very, very distorted view of the world, and you start to see things very narrowly, so that everything that you see seems to fit into this narrative of trauma. And everything you look at, you are viewing through the lens of this trauma. So you can't look anywhere without seeing... without being hyper-vigilant to anything that could indicate that this trauma is still threatening you. That's what trauma is. It's a threat that hasn't gone away, even though it isn't there in a sense. In this moment, you're not being circumcised, but in a way, every time you encounter any trigger, it takes you back to that moment, into that experience of circumcision itself, or of realizing that you're circumcised and realizing what that is, realizing that it is genital mutilation. And so when you're continually sucked into this trauma vortex, you become unable to communicate as clearly, to think as clearly. It becomes much more difficult to communicate to people in a logical, centered way. And when you do communicate, you become so emotionally invested, you can't handle it when people reject you, or when people reject the ideas that you're saying to them. It destroys you. And so you're not a very effective activist, because although you really care about it, that's important. And that's unavoidable. When you learn about it, you can't not care about it, really. If it affects you, then it affects you. And the problem is you care so much that you have to either be constantly... you are either constantly triggered and feeling like you have to warn everyone about it, and just this complete overactivation. And then you swing to the other pendulum, or you may just spend more time in this other pendulum swing where you're totally repressed and you're trying not to feel anything. You're trying not to experience anything because it's so painful. You just block it out and feel totally numb to life in this kind of deadened state where you have no connection with your own aliveness and your own potential joy. Circumcision sucks up everything in this vortex of pain. Turmeric and ginger tea, in case you were wondering, because my wrists are fucked, and I need something to decrease inflammation from my chronically injured joints. Also my knees, also my back. It's fun stuff getting old. 26, man. It's a hell of a time. So if we can deal with this trauma, if we can learn to work with our own feelings, you can process your emotions, first of all, so that you just aren't triggered as much, and you can get rid of like 95% of the trauma, so that it's just doesn't come up. But then with the last 5%, I don't know if you can really heal it 100%, honestly. But when you do get triggered, you become habitual in dealing with the pain in a way that it just moves through you. You feel it, you experience it, and then you're back in the present moment. You don't let it suck you into the past and into all of the pain of every aspect of circumcision that ever bothered you. It's not this web of the horrible torrential hellishness, hell, nightmare, etc., etc. Armageddon, Four Horsemen, bad stuff. But we have ways of dealing with it. And so I believe this will make us better activists. I believe that trauma takes you into fight or flight mode. You are not in your higher brain. You're not able to think clearly. You're not able to reason. You're not able to connect with people. Physiologically, these systems of your brain, the language center of your brain, the logic, they shut down. And this becomes a part of the culture. It becomes a part of the whole movement, because every time you interact with someone else, whether it's just reading their post online or talking to them or interacting with anyone in the movement in any way, this energy is constantly circulating through us, and it's constantly being reactivated, and it becomes this whole this cultural, sociological sort of high-level thing where the whole movement is built around this trauma, and it generates this trauma, and it's designed to pull more people into the trauma. And some people refuse to be pulled into that, and I think that's part of why it is hard to reach a good number of people, because they see what this is and they see what it does to people, and before they could even possibly let themselves think about it at all, they see the possibility and they just shut it down, and they say, yeah, that sounds pretty bad, but I'm just gonna leave you over there with the flat earthers and the men's rights activists and the other people who I want to ignore or just think are idiots, and pretend you don't exist, because that's a lot easier and makes my life a lot better. And I'm not even blaming these people. It's a defense mechanism that's intelligent, because who wants to be sucked into that trauma vortex that I just described, when you can see it and feel it and intuit that's what this is, and that's what this does to people. And that's what you bring whenever you interact with someone and you're an intactivist, trying to explain this horrible thing and get people to understand it. Even if you try to be calm and logical, it's very hard to hide this deep, profound pain that's underneath, and it's hard to communicate well, and it's hard to communicate at all. Frankly, it's hard to not just try to to forget about it and yourself just pretend that it doesn't exist anymore, because that's so much easier for a lot of people to, not make it a big part of their life. So I believe there are systemic ways of bringing healing to the movement. A lot of the top people in the movement have asked me to create healing materials. I've said I was going to, and I'm still trying to. I'm working on it. But a lot of the really the topmost people in the movement have told me, yeah, I personally could benefit from this. Please create it for me. As I said, Brendan is a friend of mine, and he's done an absurd amount of healing work already and very strongly supports it. We did a podcast on that earlier this year, that's on his channel. I might repost that at some point to my channel. We did a podcast on healing work. Did I say that? And so he's into it. I think that's one way, is from the top down, showing that healing work is cool, and that it's really useful and powerful and essential for anyone who wants to be able to continue doing this work. You will burn out if if you don't find some way to cope with it. You can't just continually engage with it every day. It will destroy you if you're a sensitive or even just normal person, I think. Um, Especially if you're a male who is circumcised, I think that perhaps makes it worse. Although I'm sure I know women who have partners or sons who are circumcised also suffer quite a lot. Um, so I think everyone needs healing work. I think everyone needs to know how to work with their emotions. And I think one way to do that is to just have people saying it's important and it's good. And a second way is to increase accessibility. So have written part of a book, and I've created videos in the past, but they need to be reworked and improved a lot. And I honestly don't even know if a video format will work because it's too dangerous to. In a way, it's always going to be dangerous to have someone do trauma work without a trauma therapist right there, explaining to them and helping them not get re-traumatized or get deeper into the trauma. It's a very delicate process because the trauma is such a vortex, and you have to engage with it eventually. But the first and most important step is to create safety in yourself and to create a sense of calm, peace, okayness, from which you can then access that trauma and gradually digest it and gradually desensitize yourself to it or deactivate it. That has to be a gradual process, and it's very delicate, and it's different for every person, so it's hard to make a video that can universally help everyone heal from their trauma, or even a book, although I've read books on healing trauma, and they're extremely helpful. So I'm thinking about writing a book or creating videos, perhaps. It'd be really nice to have like a create your own story kind of thing, like where you can select at each step what you want to say or what you're experiencing, and then the trauma program will feed back to you what to do next. Or even a more artificially intelligent type of therapy. There are internet-delivered therapy programs that are quite good, although that's more of cognitive behavioral therapy. Anyhow, I think using technology or books or some other format to increase accessibility is really one of the primary things, because right now people just don't have access. Another thing that Brendan has talked about, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, he is working on, it's going to happen eventually, I believe, is a website that will give you access to therapists. So you will be able to access, it'll be like a wiki where you can see where all the different trauma therapists are and have information about them. So that's another way to increase access to trauma therapists. Another way is to create communities and have a much more community-centric approach. So it would be trauma healing groups, and have sort of a group model where there's a certain thing you say every week, and there's a certain exercises, and then everyone talks about their experience, and then that's a very, very powerful method, because one of the most important methods of healing is the interpersonal aspect. Meeting with someone, again, having someone there with you is really important for healing. It doesn't even have to be a therapist. It can just be other trauma survivors. But having that connection piece really helps with the horrible isolation that can result from trauma. It can help create that safe space and sense of belonging that really is essential for healing. And it's very scalable, because you can then have people who have done the group run more groups and have a pyramid scheme kind of thing. I think that's not the right word, but have a train the trainer sort of model, where you train people and those people train people, and then you can have a whole community of groups who do this healing work. So that's another way. Another way, I could probably talk about this all day. I probably should move on to the next topic. But you could You could create media. So this right now is creating media, and it's just raising awareness that this is an important thing and trying to explain why it's an important thing and give people a clear understanding of what it is. Another thing is that once people start doing it, that's one of the main things that helps it happen. It's like it's always going to start kind of slowly, because it just doesn't exist yet. Right now there's very few. There is a subreddit that I've been meaning to get more into. There is a subreddit for circumcision grief, which is really quite good. There's like 900 members or something. There's a couple of Facebook groups too that aren't as active, not nearly as active as the subreddit. So, tea. Good stuff. Good stuff. It's a mixture between shit and stuff. So another aspect of this, and there's a million aspects of healing. I made like 30 hours of content about healing, and then I took down most of it because I realized it was potentially dangerous. But I'm not going to go into that right now. Culture is the other thing. Well, culture is both things. So we need to have a culture where people are used to healing, where healing is just a thing that we do, and where dealing with your own emotions is a fundamental, important thing that's understood to be fundamental and important. Because when we have that, I just think we'll be a lot more effective for reasons that I just explained. So, yeah. I could get more into that. It's an interesting thing. I think that is one of the main reasons that Intactivism, despite being one of the most objectively correct movements, like there's no question, it's so absurd. It's so absurd that genital mutilation is still happening in 2020. It's 2020. 2020. It's got a kind of a ring to it. 2020, and it's still fucking happening. It's like this is the year of the future, guys. What's going on? So, it's absurd. It's like we are clearly right if you look at it at all. Like it's so obvious, and like it's like why isn't the movement more successful? It's been around for 30 or 40 years now. We have technology. We have so many things behind us, going with us, going for us. It's strange that we haven't succeeded more yet. I mean, there are certainly things that we have going against us, like the religious issue. I'm not going to say the Jewish issue because that sounds really bad. The Jewish problem. I love the Jews. They're great. Except the genital mutilation part. That part needs to be fixed. So the Jews are a powerful group. They're great. Please don't hurt me. I love the Jews, but they're very well organized, as Eliangar Sargon has pointed out. They're one of the most organized groups, minorities in all of history. They're really quite effective at achieving their ends, whatever those be, which one of them happens to be continuing to circumcise and not letting that be defamed or made legal. So the religious aspect, the sexual aspect makes it difficult. You know, the fact that it's kind of taboo, it's kind of not something you talk about. It's kind of a problem. Although gay rights kind of face both of those. Like in a majority Christian nation, it's also a sexual issue. You know, I don't think any obstacles are insurmountable. And I think one of the reasons that we really haven't succeeded more is because it's so traumatic that it destroys us. It destroys us from the inside. And we're not effectively coping with that. We're not effectively finding a way to build ourselves back up, to develop ourselves, to become strong, and to move forward. And so we're eaten alive, and then we either block it out or we just go into a rage. And we express a lot of rage, but we're not clear and calm and logical in a way that we can really organize effectively and craft our message and be very, very logical, and it's not just logical, it's being emotional, but emotional in a social way, meaning not just vomiting our emotions on everybody, because that doesn't work. More in an emotional or social engineering way, a social what's the word I'm looking for? Social marketing. You have to craft the message so that it's really affects people. But if you're just saying whatever you feel, it's not necessarily going to be effective, and people might just think you're crazy, which in a sense you are, because when you have this level of trauma, of PTSD, it can split you into psychosis. It can split you into constantly being on alert, or into repressing everything and just shutting down into nothingness. Like it can really make you a little crazy, a little unable to like function and be a normal person anymore. And so again, that comes off. People see that you have this something weird about you, something wrong with you, and they assume that because there's something wrong with you, you think circumcision's a problem, when in fact it's because circumcision is a problem, which is causing there to be things wrong with you. But people can't distinguish that, and because it's such a rare thing, it's not a rare thing. It's rare enough that it's not like people have heard about it from a bunch of different people. So it's rare enough that at least that men talking about it is rare enough. That's another problem with trauma, again, is we're really not super vocal about it because it's really painful to. For one, we're scared to traumatize other people in the way that we've been traumatized. So often people are scared to talk about it because they don't want to traumatize someone else. For another thing, people are often just in so much pain that talking about it and having their feelings invalidated, especially by people they're close to or people they love or care about, is so unbelievably painful for someone you really want to love you and understand you and be there for you, to tell you, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. There must be something wrong with you. Think you're going a little off the deep end, man. You should probably see a therapist. You should probably see a urologist. Get that checked out. That's not normal. Like, it's really hard to express this when you know that that's a very possible response. And so there are all these things that when you have this trauma so deeply, it makes it really hard to express it and be effective and be a good advocate for this issue. Yeah. Number 2, 28 minutes and 25 seconds in, we're getting to number 2. This is going to be a little long video. Both. Brendan said both. I should interview Georgianne Chapin and Dan Bollinger. I don't know how to pronounce his name. On the circumcision as an ACE, as an adverse childhood experience study. Because I haven't talked to either of them before, but I'm going to do that. I'm also going to do a podcast with John Atkinson on his lawsuit. I'm doing things. I'm going places. I'm doing a master's of social work. If I get into school, we'll see. We'll see if they accept my references from Tyler Drozd at Forge and Jillian Longley at Colorado Advocates for Body Integrity and Children's Rights. See if they're on the Intactivist train, which I was kind of vague and just said, like, I help people deal with sexual trauma in many capacities. So we'll see how those college applications come back. And forgot where I was going with that. I'm getting tired. It's late. It's like midnight here. Goodness. Ugh. If I post something on YouTube, does it say what time it was posted in my time zone or what time it was posted in your time zone? Or does it give a time zone? I don't think YouTube says a time of day that something was posted, does it? Probably not. Because this is going to be posted at about 1 a.m. I've been staying up late lately. Anyhow, you definitely needed to know all of that. It was an essential part of this video. The second part of this video is about culture. The whole thing's about culture. This is about building communities. I think this is the second essential part of the movement, is building more robust communities. Because we have communities. We have certainly people, our communities on Facebook. People have communities on the Bloodstained Men is a great community. Your Whole Baby's got some communities aspect to it. The Forefront is a more front community. What else? We have communities, you know. The Reddit Circumcision and Grief one. There's a little community around 4gen, or not really. Actually, not really at this point. There's various other communities of people, but it's not enough, and it's not quite right. It's like, here, I'll just give you my vision because I don't want to pontificate or theorize. What I think we need to do is create, have some kind of outline. I attended a what's it called? Toastmasters meeting, and I was really impressed with the meeting structure because it gave everyone something to do. Everyone had a role. You know, this person was taking notes, this person was leading the meeting, that person was giving the awards, this person was, and then there were people giving speeches, and everybody participated, and it was kind of laid out in a way that it's copyable, that you can have it in every city, and you can have multiple even in every city. There are multiple Toastmasters groups. Toastmasters, for those of you who don't know, is a group where you practice giving speeches. Basically, you get up and give speeches, and then I only did one meeting. There's a thing where you go online, I think, and then it explains to you like how to give a speech and kind of runs you through it. And then there's a different module every week where you learn on different aspects of giving different speeches, and you go through, and then at the end of the year there's like a whole competition where everyone from each different group gets together and you know, dukes it out to see who's got the best speech. And it's really impressive. Because the outline of it really gives you some structure to go off of. Whereas right now with intactivist groups, I mean, I've attended different intactivist groups at Colorado Advocates for Body Integrity and Children's Rights, Colorado ABC. Just know that that's what I'm saying when I say that. Colorado ABC, and and Forefront, and 4gen, and others. And all to varying degrees. I feel like I'm not really I feel like I don't have a role often. I feel like I'm there, but I feel like I'm not included almost. Or like I have to include myself, and I have to try to figure out like what they're doing and how I can add to it. But it doesn't, no one's going out of their way to, you know, ask me my ideas and what I can contribute. And they're not very scalable because they're also vague. They're kind of different every time, you know, and there's no sense of who's doing what, and it's kind of like, okay, I'll do this time, and oh, that's not going to get done this time, I guess we'll just not have that. And it's like, it's very hodgepodge. So I think one way to do this is to create a model for a community. And it could be a small community. You could have, and it should be a small community. I think groups really function best when there's maybe 5 to 8 people, so that there's enough people to feel like a group and not so many people that everybody's not able to contribute. At Amazon, they call it the 2 pizza party rule. There's a lot of different business and organizational books that talk about this ideal meeting size. And so if you have this ideal meeting size, then everyone can have a role and feel like a part of it and can contribute. And then you have, every day we start with bringing an aspect of ourselves to the meeting that doesn't have to do with circumcision. That's one of the most essential things for creating culture, and I didn't see that in any of the other groups. But as it comes up, but it's not intentional. It's never intentional that we share parts of ourselves, and we, Google does this, known for one of the best cultures in the world. Everyone always brings something to the meeting and says, this is what I did this weekend. This is what's going on in my life, and then, of course, share things related to circumcision. Get feedback on. I was trying to talk to this person. These were the problems I was having. And then you can bounce ideas back and forth off each other. And then have some kind of purpose for being there. So, this needs some working on, because there are many, many ways to do this. And many different ways you can go. And I think it'll be different for different groups depending on people's interests and what they like. But you can do protests. You can lobby the government. You can lobby legislatures, for example, to remove funding for circumcision from Medicaid. Or Ron Goldman right now is suing Medicaid in Massachusetts. You can do lawsuits. You can protest. There's a number of things you can do. And you build your group around those things, or around something slightly different. It could be a strategy group. That's one of my main interests, and something I'm going to start doing here more is bringing on more strategy, talking stuff, podcasting about strategy. And you can have everyone, each week, everyone could bring an idea for strategy that they present, or that might be too much. Maybe 2 people every week could bring an idea that they want to talk about as far as intactivist strategy, and then you can discuss it. There are so many different ways you could do this, but the idea is that every week you have some structure, you have some way of connecting with the other people in the group to create a culture where you know each other and you care about each other. It's really great if it's local, because then it's easier for relationships to form. It's harder to do that when you're on an online chat group and everyone's always in the same room at the same time. So it's hard to turn to your neighbor and say something. Although I think it's possible, and I think that's important to figure out, is how to create communities online. Certainly Discord is very useful for that, and Reddit and other apps. We will have more technology for the movement soon, I can assure you. You will see what I mean by that. And so we need community. Why do we need community? I don't know if I actually said that. Did I say why we need community, or just jumping in this diatribe on community without explaining it at all? I'm getting tired. I gotta go to bed soon. Community is essential, and reworking community to be the absolute best it can be is essential, because that is the main driving force behind our culture. So the way that intactivists present themselves to the world is really highly, extremely dependent on how we interact with each other and the culture that we create as a movement. there are a lot of um, there are good spots of culture all over the movement, but they need to be, again, scaled. So that means we need to find some way um, to figure out how we can bottle it, sort of bottle this lightning, this energy, and replicate it across everywhere, rather than just have it concentrated in these small places like the Bloodstained Men, or like in Your Whole Baby groups or whatever. It's a very small place where this culture exists, and we need to find a way um, to create that in different places. And the benefit of doing that will be that we then having community allows you to have this culture and this way of being. It's a social support, and it gives you a tribe to be a part of. When you are a part of this tribe, humans are tribal creatures, and being a part of a tribe makes us much, much, much more likely to behave in a certain way, because there are people who are counting on us, who are expecting things of us, and who care about us, and who we care about them. And again, it's really fundamental that you must actually care about these people, which means you have to have some emotional connection with them and some understanding of them as people. And that's what I mean, again, by culture. You don't just talk about foreskin. You talk about foreskin, but you also talk quite a lot about everything else, about whatever you want to talk about, and just get to know each other on a personal level. There are ways you can formulaically do this, but it's got to be somewhat organic too. I tend to skew towards formulas and guidelines and rules and restrictions when I'm in this planning mode. But I actually hate being restricted, and everyone hates being restricted. I think that's human nature. We like outlines, and we like to have something to be in that's a container. And we need that, but then we also need freedom, and we need spontaneity and ability to adapt things to we need both. So I'm getting tired. Yeah, by having community, we can also do a lot more than we can do as individuals. That's the reason that capitalism is so powerful. And now we're getting into capitalism. Is because, and why America is so powerful, I think, in general, one of the reasons is diversity. Diversity is important. Another reason is because we always create organizations, as Alexis de Tocqueville, is that how you say it? Observed. We tend to form associations and organizations and groups around everything. And it's really powerful to do that. And if we can find a way to do that systematically and repeatably, and have multiple chapters in every city around the nation, and have it be the funnest thing in town. It's got to be fun. It's got to be, you have to enjoy being there. You have to have something that makes it a place you want to be. You have to be a group that people want to join. You can't just sit around and mope and talk about how horrible it is and how much we need to end this now. Even though I've done all of that, and it's important and it's good, it has to be, these two things also have to be integrated. So you have to heal and have community, and have healing in community, and have the two integrally linked, I believe. And I believe they are integrally linked automatically, because healing is really supported by communities, and communities really benefit from being healed. So, we need communities. We need communities because they'll make us more... everyone can specialize in a certain function, and then they can achieve much greater things than one person who's trying to do every little thing could do by themselves. And that's what's so great about organizations, is they compartmentalize, and then everybody contributes to a much, much greater whole. And so it would also be great, I think, if we could integrate all the different groups and really have them support each other, and have more integration across the movement, so that the whole movement and all these different groups have a common vision and community ness to them. And that's part of why I'm doing this podcast series on strategy and bringing on people from all the different groups, is because when we all are informed by each other and understand each other, then we can work together much more effectively and be more powerful as movement. So, but again, it's not just these big high-level groups. It's got to be communities. It's got to be on every street corner. There's an intactivist group, and it's fun, and they love each other, and it's a tight-knit community where people know each other and understand it and are friends, and where they know what they're doing, where they have a good sense of where they're going, where there's a clear mission, there's a clear why we're here, there's a clear structure of how we can support each other in being more effective in what we're doing. Yeah, I feel like that's probably basically what I'm trying to say here. My hair's really nice today. I did it because I was doing a video, and usually I look like shit, but I wanted to look decent. So I probably won't remake this video. I don't know if I'll post it. I think I'll post it. I think I'll post it just because I feel like posting it, and you can watch it or not. Do what you want, you know. I'm not your mom. I bet you wish I was, though, because I would cut part of your dick off if I was. It'd be weird, you know, because I'm not a female, so that would be awkward. But other than that, I'm sure it'd be great. I think I'd make a great mom. I don't know about you. I think I'd be a fantastic mother. You know, the whole breastfeeding thing might be a little difficult. I'd have to figure that out, but I'm going to go for now. I hope you all are having a wonderful day and a wonderful year, and I hope 2020 is the year that we end this once and for all. I think it could be. I think that would be pretty audacious and ambitious. But hey, you know, who knows? I don't know. I'm just a guy. Peace, love, foreskin. Happy times. Happy good times. Happy. Bye.